Across Iran, a wave of protest is sweeping the nation, echoing through city streets and rural towns alike. The air is thick with tension and hope, as people from all walks of life gather to make their voices heard. The energy is palpable, a mixture of anger, frustration, and a longing for change that has been simmering beneath the surface for years. This movement was ignited not by a single event, but by years of economic hardship and mounting frustration. For many, daily life has become a struggle, waiting in endless lines for basic necessities, watching the value of their savings evaporate, and feeling the weight of uncertainty about the future. The cost of living has soared, and ordinary Iranians are forced to make impossible choices just to get by. What began as a merchant strike in late December 2025 has exploded into a nationwide movement, uniting people from all walks of life. Shopkeepers, students, teachers, and factory workers, once separated by their daily routines, now find themselves side by side in the streets, their differences overshadowed by a shared sense of injustice and a desire for a better future. The rising price of bread was the final straw, but the anger runs much deeper, rooted in years of poverty, government corruption, and a growing sense of hopelessness. For many families, even the most basic foods have become luxuries. Children go to bed hungry, and parents worry about how they will provide for their loved ones tomorrow. Merchants, students, and workers now stand together, their unity forged by shared hardship and a belief that the system can no longer provide for them. The protests have become a symbol of solidarity, as people who once felt powerless now find strength in their numbers and in their collective voice. The Grand Bazaar's closure was a turning point, signaling that even the regime's traditional allies have reached their breaking point. The sight of shuttered shops in the heart of Tehran sent shockwaves through the country, showing that the discontent is no longer confined to the margins of society. Protests have quickly evolved from economic complaints to demands for fundamental political change, marking a new and unpredictable chapter in Iran's history. The slogans have shifted from calls for lower prices to cries for freedom, justice, and accountability. The people are no longer just asking for relief, they are demanding a new beginning. This is not just a call for reform, it's a desperate cry for survival, dignity, and freedom. The courage on display is remarkable, as ordinary Iranians risk everything to stand up for their rights. In the face of uncertainty and danger, their determination burns brighter than ever, signaling that the spark of discontent has become a fire that cannot easily be extinguished. Iran's economic collapse is the result of years of sanctions, mismanagement, and corruption. International sanctions have crippled oil exports and isolated Iran from global markets, making basic goods scarce and expensive. Domestically, state-linked organizations and the Revolutionary Guard have stifled private enterprise, concentrating wealth among the elite. Inflation has soared to over 50%, and the rial's value has plummeted, erasing the savings of ordinary Iranians. President Pezeshkian admits the government is stuck badly, unable to enact real reforms or provide relief. Experts agree, without foreign investment and major political change, recovery is impossible. The regime's refusal to compromise leaves the economy and its people trapped in crisis. For millions of Iranians, the economic crisis is not just a headline, it's a daily grinding reality that shapes every aspect of life. Each morning, families wake up facing the same relentless question: how will they make ends meet today? The struggle is visible everywhere, from bustling markets to quiet homes, as people try to stretch their limited resources just a little further. 20 million families have now fallen below the poverty line, forced to make impossible choices just to survive. Parents skip meals so their children can eat, and many are forced to ration even the most basic necessities. The sense of anxiety is constant, as every rial is counted, and every purchase weighed against what might be needed tomorrow. Food prices have skyrocketed, with essentials like rice, bread, and meat now out of reach for many. Shelves in stores are often half empty, and shoppers are left to choose between quality and quantity, or sometimes, to go without altogether. Even middle-class families now struggle to afford what was once considered basic. Housing costs have soared, pushing families into cramped quarters, or forcing them to leave the cities they once called home. For young people, the dream of owning a home feels more distant than ever, replaced by the reality of shared apartments and constant uncertainty about the future. Chronic power and water shortages disrupt daily routines, making even simple tasks like cooking or bathing a challenge. These shortages are a daily reminder of the state's inability to provide for its people, deepening the sense of frustration and helplessness. The psychological toll is immense. Despair and anger are everywhere. Skilled professionals, once the backbone of society, are leaving the country in droves, seeking stability and opportunity elsewhere. Those who stay behind often feel trapped, their hopes for a better future fading. For those who remain, hope has been replaced by a simmering anger that now fuels the protests. The streets echo with frustration, as people demand change and accountability from their leaders. The daily grind has eroded trust in institutions and left a population on edge, uncertain of what tomorrow will bring, but determined to endure and make their voices heard. The uprising is defined by the voices of ordinary Iranians, using strikes and bold slogans to demand change. The Grand Bazaar strike was a catalyst, showing that economic pain has reached even the regime's core supporters. Slogans have shifted from "we can't afford bread" to direct challenges like "death to the dictator," signaling a rejection of the entire system. Nostalgia for the pre-revolutionary era has surfaced, with chants of "Long live the Shah" echoing in the streets. Labor strikes in key industries threaten to cripple what's left of the economy, adding pressure on the regime. The combination of street protests and industrial action is a powerful challenge the authorities can't ignore. This movement is no longer just about economics, it's about reclaiming the future. The regime's response to the growing unrest has been a calculated blend of harsh repression and superficial economic gestures. As protests have swept across the country, authorities have doubled down on their use of force, determined to stamp out dissent before it can gain further momentum. The government's strategy is clear: intimidate the public into silence, while offering just enough aid to appear responsive. Security forces and the Basij militia have cracked down hard, with dozens killed and thousands arrested. Streets that once echoed with chants for change now ring with the heavy presence of armed men, their faces set in grim determination. The message is unmistakable. Any challenge to the regime will be met with overwhelming force, regardless of the cost to ordinary citizens. The military's deployment to city streets marks a chilling escalation, treating protests as a national security threat. Tanks and armored vehicles roll through neighborhoods, transforming familiar places into zones of fear and uncertainty. For many Iranians, the sight of soldiers patrolling their streets is a stark reminder of the regime's willingness to use any means necessary to maintain control. Alongside this repression, the government announced a new cash handout, about $7 per month per citizen. Officials touted this as a lifeline for struggling families, but the reality is far bleaker. With inflation soaring and the cost of basic goods skyrocketing, this meager sum barely makes a dent in daily expenses. Many see it as an insult rather than a solution. This gesture has been widely mocked as woefully inadequate in the face of soaring prices. In markets and shops, frustration simmers as people struggle to afford even the most basic necessities. Conversations are filled with disbelief and anger at the government's inability, or unwillingness, to provide real relief. The gap between official promises and everyday reality has never felt wider. The regime's dilemma is clear: it lacks the resources for real reform and falls back on violence and empty promises. Officials appear at press conferences with stern faces, insisting that order will be restored, but their words ring hollow. The ever-present police and security forces serve as a constant reminder that fear, not trust, is the foundation of the current system. This approach only deepens public anger and alienation. Each crackdown, each broken promise, pushes more people to the edge. The chants grow louder, the crowds more defiant, as Iranians demand dignity, justice, and a future free from oppression. The government's inability to address core grievances risks turning protest into revolution. What began as scattered demonstrations now threatens to become a nationwide movement, united by shared hardship and a collective yearning for change. The regime's old tactics seem less effective with each passing day. The iron fist and paltry handout reveal a system out of answers, a government clinging to power through force and illusion, while the people's demands for real change grow impossible to ignore. As protests grow, the government has imposed a near-total internet blackout, cutting off communication and isolating Iranians from the world. Social media and international calls are blocked, creating an information vacuum and fueling fear and uncertainty. State media pushes the narrative that protesters are foreign-backed, while the real stories are silenced. The Revolutionary Guard has weaponized telecommunications, sending mass texts urging citizens to inform on each other. This psychological warfare aims to sow distrust and break protester solidarity. The blackout is a familiar tactic, used to buy time for repression away from global scrutiny. But it also reveals the regime's fear of its own people and the power of information. Shutting down the internet is an admission that the truth is the regime's greatest threat. Iran's leaders and outside experts paint a stark picture of crisis and division. Supreme Leader Khamenei blames foreign conspiracies, dismissing the protests as US-backed plots. President Pezeshkian, in contrast, admits the government is stuck badly and calls the situation catastrophic. This split exposes deep fractures within the regime and validates the suffering of ordinary Iranians. Experts agree the government lacks the resources and political will for real change. Recovery would require massive foreign investment and policy shifts the regime refuses to make. With sanctions in place and no reforms on the horizon, the system is trapped by its own rigidity. The people's suffering continues, with no clear exit in sight. The world is watching Iran's crisis with growing concern. President Trump and Secretary of State Rubio have issued warnings and voiced support for the protesters, putting diplomatic pressure on Tehran. While this support may embolden some, it also allows the regime to claim the unrest is a foreign plot. The U.S. faces a dilemma: support democracy without undermining the movement's grassroots legitimacy. Washington's strategy is to apply diplomatic pressure and highlight human rights abuses, while avoiding direct intervention. The goal is to raise the cost of repression for Iran's leaders and create space for a political solution. For now, the future of Iran remains in the hands of its people. Iran stands at a crossroads, caught between a resilient population demanding change and a regime relying on force. The economic crisis shows no sign of easing, and the government's repression only deepens public anger. Every crackdown widens the gulf between rulers and ruled, making reconciliation nearly impossible. The protests have united diverse groups and shattered the fear barrier, replacing it with determination. Without major reforms, experts warn the cycle of unrest and repression will continue, plunging Iran deeper into crisis. The world watches as Iran's fate hangs in the balance. The coming months will be decisive for the country and the region. One thing is clear: the voices demanding dignity and change will not be silenced.